Today, we're going to solve together a full IELTS general training reading test. This is one of the latest official tests, and I'll walk you through every question type, give you a clear strategy for each one, and then we'll practice together. I share all my reading materials for free here on YouTube, and they'll help thousands of our students reach band 7, 8, or 9 in their tests. And I have an announcement to make. This is the first video on our new channel specifically for general training students. Most materials on YouTube are tailored to IELTS academic, but there are some important differences and you should know about them. So from now on, all general training videos will be published here, and if that's the test you're taking, please subscribe. Now, let me give you a quick outline of the format of IELTS reading general training, and then we get down to our first set of questions. You have 40 questions in 60 minutes, same as academic. The big difference is the kind of texts you read. They're shorter and more practical. Notices, advertisements, work emails, training materials. You need 30 correct answers for a band 6, 35 for a band 7, and 38 for a band 8. Our test today is from one of the latest Cambridge English practice tests, and I suggest using these tests in your preparation because they're just like the real exam papers. Well, the real exam papers are also created by Cambridge English. Right, let's open the test. Section 1 is the easier part of the test. You'll see 2 short everyday texts like notices or short articles, and usually 2 sets of questions. Most students do well here. Your goal is to complete section 1 quickly and accurately without losing marks. So we've got 2 question types coming up: matching information and true-false not given. So let's start with matching information. You have a set of statements and you need to find which, in our case, which cafe, which paragraph, each one matches. So you're looking for one specific detail. Before you start, check whether the instructions say you may use any letter more than once. If you see that note, it usually means at least one paragraph contains 2 answers. If you don't, each paragraph matches one statement only. Now, read each statement and highlight the keywords. Keywords will remind you what you're looking for. Now, read the first paragraph in full. Look through your statements and ask, is the meaning here covered by any of them? And be careful. Match the whole meaning, not just the keyword. Several statements might actually touch on the same topic, but only one will actually match what the paragraph is really saying. And if you find a match, write it down. If you're not sure, put the letter with a question mark and keep going. Don't sit on one question. Move on to the next paragraph. Some paragraphs don't match any statements, and that's fine. So once you've finished the passage, come back to anything you weren't certain about. Right, now let's solve questions 1 to 5. Pause the video and find the answers, and then resume it and we'll look at the answers together. Oh yes, and count how many questions you answer correctly. I'd like to know how you're doing, and I'll ask you again at the end of this video. Okay, ready for the first set? Pause the video. Okay, I'd like to take you through the process of finding answers rather than just review them one by one. So first of all, we need to find all the keywords in our questions. So I would say these are cup sizes, recent changes, better signage, customer base or local customer base, and the public praise. And now we read the first paragraph, the first description, coffee dream. And here we see this sentence that there is little space around the counter everyone is squashed together. So I wonder, does it mean that it needs better signage? Number 3, because it sounds like maybe customers don't know where to queue. I would say I put a question mark. So 3 question mark. Let's say we're not sure, because usually signage is outside. Okay, now let's read the second one, cafe lingo. And here we see local media are right in saying that this cafe makes the best cup of coffee. So the local media is saying something really good. So the cafe deserves the public praise. B5. What about Billy Ding's cafe? So first of all, I've read this line. This is a place that residents in the area use regularly. And that sounds like number 4. It has a strong local customer base. So I think that's C. But I'm not quite sure, so I'll still put a question mark. But remember about this line we have here. You may use any letter more than once. So don't stop reading. Read until the end and then you'll find this. So this cafe had the biggest small coffee we've ever had. So cup sizes are more generous than you might expect, right? So that's number 1, C. And that would be possible because we may use our letter C twice. But let's continue. Don't make any rushed decisions. Finish the whole section first. So I haven't found anything in D. What about E? So the description was that the last few times things weren't as good and it will lead customers going elsewhere. And that reminds me of number 2. Recent changes are likely to have a negative impact. Customers are gonna go elsewhere. So I would say that's number 2. And what about the last one? Here I found this line. There was nothing outside to indicate it was there. And that is about the signage, right? So this is number 3. 3F. And previously I thought maybe that's A, but now I know, no, it's not. And now let's look through all our answers. 1C, 2E, 3F, 4C, and 5B. Okay, so we found an answer to each question. Solved. Okay, shall we move to the next question type? This is true, false, not given. And you see this twice in the text. So once here in section 1 and then again in section 2. The section 2 set is harder and we'll come back to it later. So let's look at the first task and the set of questions. So here we have a short text about a place called Frog Valley and a development plan for it. And below the text, you see a number of statements and the task asks, do the following statements agree with the information given in the text? So to better answer these true, false, not given questions, it really helps to understand what each option means. So true. It means the statement says the same thing as the passage. The meaning is very close. So don't look for a tiny 2% difference. If the meaning is very similar, it's true. False means there is a direct contradiction, not a subtle tiny difference. The passage clearly says something different. And not given is the one students mix up the most. So not given doesn't mean the topic isn't given. Usually you can still find the part talking about it. But the passage doesn't give you enough information to decide if the statement is true or false. A key detail is missing, so it's not given. Okay, let's look at the strategy. You read the title and you know it's true, false, not given. Next, decide when you read the passage. You have two options. If you're reasonably advanced and you can skim it in about a minute, do it first. Highlight any keywords the questions might ask you about. If the reading takes longer than a minute, it may be better for you to go straight to the questions and read the passage piece by piece as you work through them. Try both and see which one works for you. The good news is true, false, not given questions come in order. Here is what it means. You can read the first statement, start reading the passage and find the answer, read the second statement, resume reading the passage, find your answer, and keep going through the passage from where you stopped. So you don't need to jump around. And two quick tips before you try it. First of all, test writers almost always use all three options at least once. So if you end up with 5 truths in a row, that's a red flag. Go back and check. And don't overthink it. Don't look for tiny differences. Just read the text and the statement carefully and answer. Now, let's solve questions 6 to 10 together. We're not going to tackle the whole task. It's quite long. So pause the video and resume once you're ready. Okay, let's check if your answers are correct. So when I see true, false, not given tasks, first of all, I would read all the statements and highlight the keywords to remember what information I'm actually looking for in the passage. So here I'm looking for something about the new primary school, again the new school, then shops, the community center, and the swimming pool. And then we'll read all those statements in detail and make sure that all the details match, not just the keyword. And so we start quickly reading the passage, and then there is nothing in the first paragraph. We come to the second one, and this one is actually about the primary school. So we read the first statement again, and it says that builders have already started work on the primary school. But in the passage, it says, if building does go ahead, so it hasn't gone ahead yet. They haven't started work. So the first answer is false. So I know that number 7 is coming next. And let's read the statement. The new school will take in children from outside of Frog Valley. Let's see what our passage says about it. So the size and location of the school mean admission will not be limited to families who live in the area. This means they will take children from outside. So number 7 is true. What about number 8? There will be an increase in the number of shops. So an increase. And in the passage, we can see that there will be a new shopping mall. So what's going to happen to the number of shops? We can read that they actually move all the existing local shops, and this will see the addition of an organic farm shop and a vegan store. So all the existing shops plus 2 more. So there will be an increase. True. And have you noticed that if you just stopped here, you would answer that there is no increase because they just moved the shops. But the idea continues, and you need to keep on reading and read until the end to make sure you don't leave out any important details. What about number 9? The community center will replace an existing social club building. So that means there is currently a social club building and it will be replaced by the new community center. But when we read the paragraph about a community center, we find this information that until now, they have had to meet wherever they can find a venue. This means there is no existing social club building. So the community center will not replace it because there is no existing building. And this means the answer is false. What about the swimming pool? So we can read that there will be a new gym with the swimming pool. And the question is if the swimming pool will be free for residents. But when we read the passage, we see that younger residents have been requesting it for some time and it hasn't been possible due to cost. But there is nothing about how much they need to pay for this new swimming pool. And actually, we would continue reading the passage further to see if the answer is there. But the next paragraph is already about the business premises. And our question number 11 is about the business premises. So we know that the only information about the swimming pool is in this sentence, and there is no answer. This means the answer is not given. Okay, and that's section 1 done. And before we look at the more challenging version of true, false, not given questions, I wanted to say that this video is part of the Ultimate IELTS Guide series, which covers every section and every task in the IELTS test, both academic and general training. And to go with it, there is a companion PDF guide, which includes extra materials for each lesson, including this one, and I'll link it for you to download below. All right, let's open section 2. The text is slightly longer than in section 1, and the language is a bit more formal. So we have a text about Pursuit Training Institute. Have a look at the title and notice that the text is split into sections: courses, facilities, security, medical care. Okay, so we know what we're going to cover. And the true, false, not given set in section 2 is harder because basically you need to pay attention to small details. Now, I'd like you to try to answer questions 15 to 19 by yourself, and then we'll look at the answers together. Ready? Okay, let's have a look at the next question type. Well, first of all, let's address the keywords. So in number 15, we're looking for information about overseas teaching experience, about the module length, about taking holidays, about timetables, and an attendance certificate or absences through illness. So we start reading the passage. We read the first paragraph, the subtitle. There is nothing here. We keep on reading and we find this sentence. So it's about the teaching staff, many of whom have taught overseas. And the statement says all of the staff have overseas experience. But there is a difference between many of whom and all. The meaning is not the same. So the answer is false. Next, number 16. All modules are of equal length. And we're looking for the length of modules. And we can read that this institute provides courses in 10-week modules. So it seems they are of equal length. They are 10 weeks long. But if we continue reading, we may find more confusing information that some courses are 3 to 4 modules long. And here it's important to notice the difference between courses and modules. So modules are 10 weeks long, but courses may have a different number of modules. But the question is about the modules. They are of equal length. Yes, that's true. Now, number 17. Students are encouraged to take holiday in the 2-week breaks between modules. So they're encouraged to take holidays in those 2-week breaks. What does the passage say about it? So indeed, there is a break of 2 weeks between each module. But since projects or assignments are set for completion in these periods, it's not possible to take vacations. Not possible. And the question says that students are encouraged So the meaning is quite different. So that's false. Number 18. Courses may have very different timetables. So in the passage we read that each course has varying needs, so there are not necessarily any set hours for classes across all programs. And this means courses have very different timetables. Yes, that's true. What about the last one? I find it's pretty tricky. So the statement says that if you're ill, you'll receive an attendance certificate. Is it true? Well, in the passage we read that actually there are two types of certificates: attendance and achievement certificates. And if you're ill, you have a legitimate reason, you'll receive an achievement certificate. Achievement. But the question mentions attendance. These are different certificates. So the answer is false. Okay, how did it go? So a quick timing tip before we go on. You might have noticed the test says spend about 20 minutes on each section. Not each task, but each section, part 1, 2, and 3. I would ignore that. Section 1 is the easiest. Section 3 is the hardest. So giving each one 20 minutes means you're spending too much time on the easier part and then rushing through the hardest part. See if you could spend 15 minutes on section 1, 20 on section 2, and then 25 on section 3. I call it the 15-20-25 rule. If you're really advanced, go through the sections even faster to have some time at the end to check some of the answers or to go back to those questions you couldn't answer straight away. The key is to go through the test faster, but without making more mistakes. Now, on to the next set of questions, which is very common in general training tests, and I know my students have a few questions about them. So here's what you should know. Now we have a short passage about scholarships and some short answer questions. Basically, there is a question and you give a short answer using words or numbers from the passage. You don't write your own words. You take them from the text. You should really pay attention to the word limit. So the instructions might say no more than 2 words or no more than 3 words and or a number, like in our case, or something else. So this rule is strict. If you write 4 words instead of 3, you lose the mark, even if the answer is there. So the rule isn't just about giving the right answer, it's about giving the right answer in the right number of words. So let's say the instructions say no more than 3 words and or a number. Then 22 smart IELTS students is fine. 3 words and a number. 22 very smart IELTS students is over the limit and gets 0, even though the meaning is the same. One more thing students often get wrong. You don't need to include articles. No a, an, or the at the start of the answer. Sometimes in the answer sheet, you will see a word, for example, the in brackets, and this means you can include it and it will still be correct, or you don't include it and it's also correct. The answer is correct either way. In a different type of the fill-in-the-blank questions where you have a summary, for example, and a gap inside a sentence, if the article is needed, it will already be there, so don't include them. Now, the questions come in the same order as the passage. You read the first question, highlight the keywords, find the answer in the passage, then go to the next question and keep reading from where you left off. When you find what you think is the answer, check 2 things. Does it fit the word limit? And does it actually answer the question? For example, who pays for X? Needs a person or a group. How much does X cost? Well, needs a number and currency like $20. Right, let's solve questions 25 to 27 together. Pause the video now. First of all, what are we looking for? So, the minimum course length, airfares, and who pays for dependent children. Right, let's have a look at the paragraph. So, number 25 first, and we find it here. So, these scholarships are available for full-time study and are not offered for courses of less than 20 weeks duration. So the minimum course length is 20 weeks. And you can write 20 as a number or as a word, both are correct. 26. What do scholarship winners receive towards their airfare if they live over 250 kilometers from Sydney? So they live really far. So first, our paragraph talks about those who live not more than 2,500 kilometers. And if the distance exceeds this amount, okay, that's what we need, they are provided with airline vouchers. So 26, the answer is airline vouchers. If you answer just vouchers, that will still be counted as correct. Now 27. Who pays for dependent children to travel? We'll find it here. Travel costs or support for dependent children are at the scholarship holder's expense. So who pays? The scholarship holder. And you can answer scholarship holder, or if you include the article the scholarship holder, it's still not more than 3 words, so this answer will be correct. But normally, just don't include articles in your answers. And now we're going to move on to section 3 with the hardest questions. And if you want to find more questions to practice with for free, I'm going to link all the official free questions in the Ultimate IELTS Playbook, which you can download below. And if you download it now, we'll send you an email as soon as we update the guide with extra materials for other sections of the test. The link is below. Okay, on to section 3. Section 3 is one long passage with, in our case, 3 sets of questions. The questions are summary completion, matching features, and multiple choice questions with one option. The text is more complex than section 1 or 2, and the topic is usually more academic, and the questions ask you to think more carefully about the meaning. And if you're aiming for a high score, band 7, 8, or 9, you really need to get this section right. So before we look at the first set, a quick tip. With a passage this long, you've got 2 options. If you read fairly fast, skim the passage in 3 to 4 minutes before you look at any of the questions. This gives you a rough map of where things are. If reading takes you longer than that, go straight to the questions, finding answers as you work through them. Either way, when you read, highlight keywords, surnames in particular, because you need them for the matching features task in just a few minutes. And finding them later is much faster if they're already marked in the text. So let's start with summary completion. This task gives you a short summary of the passage with a few words missing. And your job is to fill in those gaps using words from the passage. So first, read the instructions. This one says 1 word only. So your answer must be exactly 1 word, not 2 words, not a word and a number. Remember those articles we talked about? Don't include them here. So here is something really useful to know about summary completion. The official instructions say answers will not necessarily occur in the same order as in the text, but they will usually come from one section rather than the entire text. In my practice, most of the answers still tend to be in order, but some may be swapped around. Okay, the strategy. Start by reading the summary itself before going back to the passage. For each gap, ask what kind of word could fit. Is it a noun, a verb? Is there an article in front of the gap, like a or the? If there is an or a, your answer is a singular countable noun. If there is no article where you would expect one, your answer is probably plural or uncountable, like water or seeds. And once you've got a rough idea what each gap needs, find which part of the passage the summary is about. Start reading the passage until you find it. So read that section carefully. The passage will use different words from the summary, so match the meaning, not the exact words, but then once you find the word, copy it carefully. Spelling matters. When you think you found the answer, put it in the gap and check two things. So first, does it work grammatically? And does the whole sentence still make sense? And here I see two types of common mistakes. First, plurals. If the passage uses a plural form, use the plural form too and check that it's correct, grammatically correct. If it uses the singular, use the singular. Second, articles, don't include them in your answer. If an article is needed, it's already in the summary. Right, let's solve questions 28 to 30 together and pause the video now. Whenever you have a task where you need to complete a summary, we know that all the answers will be close together, so all of them are actually in the first paragraph of the passage. So I've copied it for you. And we're looking for one word only. So let's read the first two and try to predict what we're looking for. 28, so we know for sure we're looking for a noun that used to be grown there. So something that used to be grown. So it was grown in the past, but is not grown anymore. It has disappeared. And the countryside is more like parts of, and 29. So we're looking for some sort of a location, right? Let's have a look at our passage. We can read that neat fields of maize have been replaced with a landscape. So 28 is maize. Be careful, it's not fields. Fields doesn't fit grammatically, the sentence doesn't make sense. The answer is maize. So the fields of maize have been replaced with a landscape that resembles the typical grasslands of Africa. So the countryside is more like parts of Africa. Again, the answer is Africa and not grasslands, because parts of grasslands makes no sense. Now, number 30. The state holds the largest number of, something of a particular species in the whole country. So we read, the state boasts more of the unusual purple emperor butterflies. So the largest number of butterflies of a particular species. And please note, your answer must be plural. Butterflies, the largest number of butterflies, not butterfly. Just copy the noun as it is from the passage. If it's plural, it should remain plural. Next, we have a very different type of task that requires a completely different strategy, matching features. The task gives you a list of statements and a box with options. In our case, the options are researchers' names. Your job is to decide which statement matches which person. And there is one really important thing to know about matching features. The questions are not in order. The answer to question 31 might come at the end of the passage, and the answer to question 36 might be near the start. So if you try to work through them one by one, you waste a lot of time. Here is a better strategy. So first check if the instructions say you may use any letter more than once. If they do, at least one person matches two statements, usually. If they don't, like in our case, each person matches one statement only. So once you've used a letter, cross it out to see what's still left. Now, look through the options in the box. Get familiar with the names. If you've read the passage first, you should have already highlighted all the names in it, so it would be easier for you now. If you haven't read the passage, you'll be highlighting these names as you go. That's fine too. Now, read all the statements and highlight the keywords to remind yourself what each statement is about. Now, scan the passage one name at a time. Start reading or scanning, looking for the first name. Then once you find it, slow down. Read what the passage says about that person, usually a sentence or two around the name. Some information maybe before, some after. So try to match it to the statements. Move to the next name and do the same. And keep going until you reach the end of the passage. And if a name doesn't match any statement, just move on, that's fine. Some names are mentioned in the passage, but don't have a matching statement. That's normal. Once you finish the passage, go back to any statements you couldn't match. And by that point, some options will already be used, so the remaining ones are easier to figure out. Right, let's solve the first part of these questions together. Pause the video and find the answers to this part of the passage. Before we start scanning our passage for the names of these scientists in the box, we read all the statements, and as we read, we highlight the keywords to remind ourselves what we're looking for. So people who are against rewilding, so rewilding is making something wild again. So taking part in rewilding, then a landscape thickly covered in trees, natural spaces for people to enjoy, then the support of people, and take rewilding seriously, and people get used to the idea. You may actually highlight different keywords. It doesn't matter. Whatever helps you remember what each statement is roughly about. You don't need to memorize them. Now, we'll start with the passage. We just start scanning for any surnames, and we go through the first paragraph. Well, we read it already, and there is not a single surname. So we move on to the second paragraph, and we keep on scanning until we find this name, Leo Lenaerts. And we read this. So he says, many Dutch objected to nature development 30 years ago, but rewilding principles are now mainstream. So he compares what was in the past, they objected, and now it's mainstream, it's popular, it's accepted. And this reminds me of this statement. 36. There is evidence that people get used to the idea of rewilding with time. So it was not popular, people objected, now it's mainstream, so they got used to it. 36. B. And in our task, we can use any letter only once, so we cross out Lenaerts, we've used this surname. Let's continue scanning the text and we find George Monbiot. So we read all the information about him, and basically he talks about reintroduction of bears, wolves, and so on into the landscape again. But when we look through our statements, there is nothing like that. So actually we can't match him to any statement. And that's all right. Let's continue reading. And we find the next surname, Franz Vera. So we read everything about him. But in particular, he says that natural grazing creates a more dynamic landscape, a constantly changing pattern of open glades and wooded groves. So look at statement 33. Rewilding does not necessarily lead to a landscape thickly covered in trees. So no, his landscape is more dynamic and it has open glades, not just thick woods. So 33 is D. And we cross him out. Let's continue. The next is David Balhary. And he cautions that rewilding in Scotland will only be championed by policymakers and politicians when it's led by local communities. Have a look at number 35. The support of people living in the area is needed to make the authorities take rewilding seriously. So authorities are policymakers and politicians, and support of people living in the area is led by local communities. So that's our answer, 35E. And again, we cross him out. So we're only looking at part of the task, but you continue this way. And then once you're finished, you return to any statements you couldn't match the first time round and try to find where the answer is. Now, the next question type is multiple choice, and we do find it in almost every test. It can be quite tricky, so let me show you how to find your answers. So first, let's have a look at the questions. You're given a question and 4 options, A, B, C, D. 1 is correct. Sometimes the questions themselves tell you where to find your answers, for example, in the 5th paragraph or in the final paragraph. Others don't. But multiple choice questions come in the same order as the passage. Once you found the answer to question 37 in the passage, the answer to question 38 will be after that, and so on. So start by really understanding the question. Highlight the keywords, name, dates, or paragraph references, like in the 5th paragraph. Then quickly skim the 4 options. You just want a general sense of what each one is about. You don't need to memorize them. Now go to the paragraph the question points you to, or find the keyword if you need to, and read that paragraph closely. Not skim, read. Once you understand what the passage says, compare each option to the passage one by one. Here is where mistakes happen. Several options will be mentioned in the passage in some way, but some details don't match. So cross out the options that don't match so you have few options to choose from. Look for paraphrasing. The words in those options, especially in the correct answer, are often paraphrased. And read all 4 options before you choose. Pick the one that matches the passage exactly. And then move on to the next question. Okay, let's solve questions 37 and 38 together. Pause the video now. Let's have a look at question number 37. And once you read it, you know exactly where the answer is in the 5th paragraph. And we have a keyword as well, borrow. And that's the 5th paragraph about borrow for you. So we need to read the whole paragraph and then carefully compare each statement to what the paragraph actually says. For example, we read this: ecotourism makes as much profit as his conventional farm did, but option C says has considerably increased the money he makes from his farm. No, he hasn't increased the money. So that's incorrect. We cross it out. Then we read, his profits may be steady, while conventional dairy and cattle farm incomes fall dramatically. So he had clear financial reasons for rewilding his farm. It looks like A is correct, but let's continue until the end of the paragraph and try to find all the options. Then we read this. It takes a new eye to look at this and say, that's beautiful, rather than go, that's just a real mess. So it may look extremely untidy, but Burrow is not worried about it. He's just talking about other people, so that's incorrect. What about D? He was guided by other people. Well, actually, we only can find that no farmers have yet followed his example. So no, he wasn't guided by other people. So yes, indeed, A is correct. What about question 38 and Helmer? So we're looking for what he says about young people and the land, and we actually find his name right here, Hooter Helmer. But this paragraph is not about young people and the land. He actually mentions young people here when he asks Dutch students who wants to farm. So we continue reading and then we compare each option to our paragraph. So let's look at them one by one. A, they want to leave it and find work in the city. Well, we know that young people often leave countryside and their farms, but he actually didn't say that. All he said was, when he asks them who wants to farm, no one raised their hands. But they're not saying they want to leave it and find work in the city. So be careful. What about B? Many want to take over running their family farms. Well, we haven't read that. Let's continue. They have developed new ways of interacting with it. Indeed, new ways of interacting with it. We've read that. They have a completely different relationship to nature, to their parents and grandparents. So yes, it looks like C is correct. But what about D? Many are interested in building businesses on farmland. Again, that wasn't mentioned. So our answer is 38C. So we've solved 26 questions in total today. How many did you answer correctly? Let me know in the comments. And if you want to practice these and other question types used in IELTS reading, you can find all the free official practice tasks in the Ultimate IELTS Playbook. And you'll also find extra materials to prepare for each section of your exam. I'll link it below. And I would really appreciate it if you subscribe to our new General Training IELTS channel. It would be a great support for us, and thank you so much for watching this video. Good luck with your preparation and your exam!